Welcome everyone. My name is Engineer Ranadip Chakraborty. In continuation to the yesterday's session, whatever we have discussed yesterday, that is regarding the structural some difficulties what we face at site during our constructional works. So yesterday I have completed already regarding the portion of the slab. Today I will discuss about some structural difficulties what we face during site works regarding the beam and columns. I will only discuss about some practical problems, not what you will find in the books directly. So it may sound much silly, but it is very important part what we must consider as an engineer, especially an engineer being at site from the very start of the work to the end, because as a site engineer it is your 100% responsibility to make everything happen as per the drawings and designs, because designer will design something by his or her mathematical calculation, but if it is not implemented at site as per the drawing and design, then it is bound to give ill performance or the performance not being up to the mark. So as a site engineer, it is our duty to check it and make it. What I have seen from my past experience at site regarding the casting of beam, there is one difficulty which I have already told, that cover blocks are not given properly. Secondly, beam reinforcement are not put in the straight alignment, make it in serpentine in nature, which causes torsional reactions at the point of each change of the direction in its path. That is one thing which is similar to slab. The problems which are occurring in the slab due to such difficulties and such errors will result in the same type of performance deterioration in case of beam also. Now the next thing is what we must give proper attention is to stirrups, the vertical stirrups or the inclined stirrups. Generally we provide the vertical stirrups. These vertical stirrups are pretty much neglected. We only most of the engineers look after the detailings of the main bars and the top bars, but not in the proper placing is alignment of the vertical stirrups. But vertical stirrups in case of beams, especially for the larger span beams or heavily loaded structures or the commercial structures, is as much as important as the reinforcement which are provided for taking the tensional stresses or the tensile stresses, because in case of the larger beams, shear force plays a crucial role also, side by side along with the bending moment, and we already know that we provide the shear reinforcement in form of the vertical stirrups in most of the cases. So vertical stirrups are very much important. Now there is another aspect also. If the physical dimension of the vertical stirrups is not proper, especially in terms of its height, then it will also affect in the effective depth of the beam, actually what we are giving. Give stress on the term effective depth. I am not mentioning about the total depth. Total depth will be provided irrespective of what the height of the stirrup you are providing at the site, because it depends only the overall depth, the actual overall depth only depends upon the formwork, that is the inside clearance between the shuttering and formwork. So, I am not talking about that overall depth. As an engineer, we are much more concerned with the effective depth, not the overall depth. Now, coming one by one. First of all, the shear reinforcement of the vertical stirrups must be placed perfectly vertical, not inclined, because the calculations by which these shear reinforcement of the vertical stirrups have been provided, the spacings and the diameters have been done based upon the formulae which have been provided in the IS code for the vertical stirrups in most of the cases, if not specially designed for the inclined stirrups. But if in actual case we provide the stirrups not vertical but in inclined position, then what it is expected to perform and what it will perform will definitely differ. So, first of all, we must check that the stirrups must be vertical. This is point number 1. Second point is that the hooks which are provided at the corners of the stirrups are made of the reinforcing steel bars what we provide for the tensile reinforcement or the compressive reinforcement, same kind of bars, but in much smaller diameter like 8 mm or 10 mm as the case may be, we provide as the shear reinforcement by bending it in the form of the stirrups. Suppose at this corner we are starting the bending of the stirrup, coming down, bending like this, bending up, bending left, and at the corner point we are providing a hook so that the stirrup stays at its place, it does not move out. This hook, there is some criteria there we must keep in mind. First of all, the hook shall never be less than the 65 millimeter as per the ductile detailing code, but preferably it is better way to provide it by 75 millimeter. And secondly, this hook must be producing an angle of 135 millimeter. It should not be just a 90-degree bend as similar to the original bending alignment of the stirrup. It should bend inside the beam in 135-degree angle. This is the second point. And third point is that, see, why we are providing the vertical stirrups? We provide the vertical stirrups because to check the shear stresses what is being developed in the beam. Now, as we know, the shear stress keeps increasing near the support, as in most of the practical cases what we deal in, it is loaded with UDL, not with concentrated load. If the case is that we are having a simple beam with some concentrated load at some point, then the shear force does not change along the span, it changes only where that particular loading is put, not in the other places. But practically what we do is that we are designing a beam for the UDL, that is uniformly distributed load, or UVL in many cases, but generally it is designed as UDL. So, in case of the UDL, the shear force is varying linearly, having its maximum value at the support and becoming minimum and changing its sign and getting maximum to the other side of the support on the other end. So, what we see that as in beam, in RCC beam, we are already providing some reinforcement into it, we are already giving some depth to that beam. So, by its own entity of being a RCC member with certain depth, it has some inbuilt capacity to resist the shear force, shear stresses rather, but that is up to certain extent depending upon the grade of the concrete, the depth of the beam and the percentage of reinforcement. But that thing is limited to only certain extent. As we go near to the support from the middle part of the beam, considering it a simply supported beam only for the simplification of my explanation. So, as we move towards the support from the center of the beam, we will notice that the shear force is gradually increasing. Now, in practical cases, the section of the beam is uniform throughout the span. Hence, having the uniform cross section, we can say that near the support or towards the support, the shear stress is increasing. There will be certain point at which the shear stress will increase or exit the existing capability of that beam, which it can prevent the shear stresses without having any assistance from any shear reinforcement. There will be certain point. So, up to that point, shear reinforcement is not a very critical aspect, but beyond that point, shear reinforcement is pretty critical thing that we must consider. So, the shear main part of the shear force, the big chunk of the shear force mainly takes place near the support zone, and to be precise and for the ease of understanding, it mainly happens within the 25% of the span from both the ends. Suppose we are having a 6 meter beam with effective span of 6 meter, then most of the part of the shear force will occur within 1.5 meter from the each end of the support. So, shear reinforcement in this 1.5 meter zone length at both the side of the beam is of very much importance, and the importance is of the shear reinforcement is highest just near the support, because the shear force is maximum over there and consequently the shear stresses will be maximum. What I have noticed that in many sites that shear reinforcement of the vertical stirrups, some people call it as ring in local language, is provided with a bit too much of gap from the face of the column. But according to the ductile detailing code, we must provide the shear reinforcement, and it should start from within the 50 millimeter from the face of the column. So, we must ensure that thing that the first vertical stirrup which is provided from the face of the column, suppose this is the column face and this is the beam, this is the face of the column and this is the beam. So, the first reinforcement, shear reinforcement of the vertical stirrup must be put within the first 50 millimeter from the face of the column. That thing must be ensured, because within those very near portion of the support, it is the shear stress is of much importance. But afterwards, as we go towards the middle of the span, as the shear stress decreases, even if we there put the shear reinforcement too close, it will be only of waste, because there is no need technically. Vertical stirrups or any kind of stirrups what we are providing for the shear stress checking must be thoroughly adhered to as per the design within the near the support zone. I am not saying that we must not adhere in the middle span. I am not saying that. We must look into it as a whole throughout the beam as per the designer's given data, but within the near support zone it is of much critical nature. So, we must give our utmost concentration, our focus and our engineering scrutinizing capability in those parts without any error. This is the third most thing. And fourth important thing, which is which is related to dimension of the shear reinforcement, but what it does is it actually reduces the capacity of the beam. In a simply supported beam, it is of not much important, because as we know, in a simply supported beam, maximum bending moment will be at the mid of the span for UDL, and it will turn into 0 at the support. Though it is in practical construction, it is not possible to place a beam completely simply supported. There will be some restraint, there will be some restraint at the end. Hence, code says that we must consider a moment of WL by 24, that is total load multiplied by the span, effective span divided by 24. That for that much of moment we must provide reinforcement at the top zone, that is at the compressive area, so called compressive area from the beam perspective, though it will be given for the tensile reinforcement, because it is provided for taking up the negative moment which may develop due to the beam being restrained to somewhat due to a practical consideration, due to the construction, because it is completely impossible at site to provide us perfectly simply supported beam. So, we must give some extra provision to check that negative moment. But in case of in simply supported beam, the negative moment or the hogging moment is not the governing moment for the design aspects. It is the positive moment or the span moment which governs the design of the beam, its dimension and its reinforcement, main reinforcement or the higher value of the reinforcement. But in case of the continuous beam, which is the most practical case, whatever we do now in a building is mostly a continuous beam, because if you are having a frame structure or even a simple building with say 2 rooms, we will be having a continuous beam of 2 span or 3 span or whatever. So, in those cases the maximum moment is the support moment. The support moment is hogging moment in nature, that is it generates the negative bending moment, and it generally occurs within the interior supports. So, here the governing moment is the negative bending moment, not the positive bending moment or the span moment. Now, as I have said, now as I have said that in case of the continuous beam, the governing moment is the negative bending moment, that is the interior support moments, which is the hogging moment in nature. It means that the tensile stresses will occur at the top of the beam, not at the bottom of the beam. because hogging moment means the curve in which the beam is bending. We will see that the larger curve is on the top side and this smaller curve of the beam is on the bottom side. So, in that case the tensile face is at the top, not at the bottom, as we see in case of the positive bending moment or the middle span moment or at the mid span of the beam. The main governing moment is the positive bending moment, and we must provide the tensile reinforcement at the bottom, because the tensile face is at the bottom and at the top we are having the compressive face. But near the support zone, as the moment pattern changes from sagging to hogging, that it is turning from positive to the negative bending moment beyond the point of contraflexure. So, tensile face is at the top and it is the governing moment, and the whole beam design is depth is reinforcement, critical reinforcement is based on that moment only, not on the positive moment. So, in that case, as the tensile face is at the top, hence the effective depth will be calculated from the reinforcement what we are providing at the top, that is the longitudinal reinforcement provided at the top, from center of that reinforcement to the bottom extreme face of that beam. Am I clear? In case of the mid span, the effective depth we are considering is for the positive moment, and it is from the center of the bottom reinforcement to the top edge of the slab or beam. But in case of the negative bending moment, as the tensile face is at the top, we have to consider the effective depth from the center of that reinforcement, that tensile reinforcement. Here the tensile reinforcement is at top. The center of the tensile reinforcement, which is at top now, to the edge of the beam, bottom face in this case. Now, what I was trying to point out over here, if the overall depth of the vertical stirrup is shorter than it should be, then it is obvious that the effective depth will get reduced. Why and how? See, we provide the reinforcement by just the inner side of the vertical stirrups, right. So, it is obvious if we reduce the size of the or the height of the vertical stirrup, then it is obvious that the reinforcement which we are passing through the underside of the ring, underside of the vertical stirrup, will be also embedded too much into the beam, not on the near the edge. For an example, suppose there is one beam having 500 millimeter of overall depth, and designer has said that it will be having 25 millimeter of clear cover. So, what should be the size of the that vertical stirrup or height of the vertical stirrup? Let us also include some more data. Suppose a designer has designed a beam whose overall depth is 500 millimeter. It is running through a slab of say 100 millimeter thick, and clear cover as has been mentioned by the designer is 25 millimeter. Then what should be the dimensions of the vertical stirrup, especially the height? I am not talking about the width, I am much more interested in the height of the vertical stirrup. Why? Because it is, if it is I mean not proper, if the height of the vertical stirrup is reduced, then what is it is expected to be, then it will reduce the whole effective depth of the beam, whole bending moment carrying capacity of the beam, whole moment of resistance of the beam. Even though we will be having a larger depth of the beam, but it will not be effective against the loading, against the bending moment. So, as I was telling in that example, there is one 100 millimeter slab and 500 millimeter overall depth of beam, 25 millimeter of clear cover. Now, what should be the depth of the vertical stirrup? See, there is one misconception for which this problem of the vertical stirrup being, height of the vertical stirrup being reduced is happening. That misconception is that mostly at site, many people think that the depth of the beam does not include the depth of the slab. They think that beam is a separate entity than the slab, though it is not. In our practical cases, there is no such thing as pure rectangular beam, because we do not do like this, na, that we put slab separately and beam separately supporting just beneath it. We cast the slab and beam monolithically. So, the depth of the slab just above the portion of the beam wave, what you can see back over here exposed beneath the slab is the wave of the beam. It is not the completely the whole beam, it is only the wave portion of the beam. For complete depth of the beam, we must include that slab, because the portion of the slab just running above the wave of the beam is also a part of the beam. First, we must understand this. What we see beneath the slab is only the wave portion of the beam. The slab portion above the beam is also a part of the beam, and it is also in the depth of the beam. By 500 millimeter of overall depth of the beam, we mean that including the thickness of the slab and the wave which is exposed beneath the slab of that beam is 500 millimeter. Not only that, the wave, the portion which is exposed beneath the slab is 500 millimeter, it includes the depth of the slab also. So, if the overall depth of the slab is 100 millimeter and overall depth of the beam is 500 millimeter, it means that the 400 millimeter is exposed beneath the slab and 100 millimeter is in the slab. That is 400 plus 100, it is 500 millimeter of overall depth. Now what happens that as site, masons do like they only, think that the part of the exposed portion of the beam, that is the beam wave, is only the beam, not the slab portion embedded into it. So, they prepare the vertical stirrups based on that exposed height. Hence, they produce vertical stirrups which is of much lesser height than what it should be. For a 500 millimeter of beam having overall depth and being part of the 100 millimeter slab along with it, and having 25 millimeter of clear cover at the both ends, having 8 millimeter of diameter of vertical stirrup diameter, then the vertical stirrup must have a height internally of how much? Let us calculate. 500 millimeter is overall depth including the slab. So, we must give the clear covers as specified. Clear cover is 25 millimeter as specified by the designer, and we are having 8 millimeter diameter of the vertical stirrup. So, the distance between the exposed edge of the slab and the just beneath of the vertical stirrup is 25 millimeter plus 8 millimeter, simple, from top side also, from bottom side also, or make it much simpler. Let us calculate the depth of the outer height of the vertical stirrup. So, we must only just minus the cover from each side. So, it was 500 millimeter of overall depth, deducting the cover from the top and the bottom, we deduct 25 millimeter plus 25 millimeter, 50 millimeter out of the 500 millimeter. So, we get the 450 millimeter. So, we must provide a vertical stirrup which is having a height of outer 450 millimeter, not anything less. But practically what happens that at many sites mason does like thinking only the web portion of the beam as the beam. So, in this case it will be 100 millimeter, deducting the 100 millimeter from the 500 millimeter beam, it is 400 millimeter of the exposed wave. He thinks that 400 millimeter is the depth of the beam, and he makes a vertical stirrup of 400 millimeter minus 2 cover, that is 25 millimeter and 25 millimeter, that is 350 millimeter. Hence, what happens that you were about to put 450 millimeter of height of the vertical stirrup, instead you are giving 350 millimeter. So, you are reducing 100 millimeter of the depth of the beam, effective depth of the beam, because if you are reducing the vertical stirrup height, naturally it will reduce your effective depth of the beam, as we are passing the reinforcement just beneath the or just underside the vertical stirrup. So, 100 millimeter of reduction of the effective depth of a beam will reduce the moment carrying capacity drastically. Why? For UDL, what is the formula of the bending moment? See, it is for the midspan bending moment, it is WL square by 8 for simply supported beam and having UDL load. So, my point is the thing, whatever I am just trying to say, that for reduction in this depth, okay, for reduction in this depth, there will be drastical reduction in the moment carrying capacity. Okay. Why? Let us see. Let's take an example. Suppose we are designing a beam with Fe415 steel and M20 grade of concrete. So, here we see that FCK, that is the characteristic compressive strength of the concrete, is 20 Newton per millimeter square, and for Fe415, if we reduce the formulae for the under reinforced beam for calculating the moment of resistance, we will get that ultimate limiting moment of resistance is mu lim equals to 0.138 FCK BD square. So, 0.138 is constant, FCK for certain grade of concrete is constant, B is the width of the beam, here it is constant, D is the effective depth of the concrete, effective depth of the beam. So, if we reduce the depth to certain unit, it is going to reduce the moment carrying capacity of that beam in terms of square, that is D square. So, if you are reducing the 10 mm, it will reduce 10 square, like that. So, it is of much important, mostly in case of the continuous beam, because in continuous beam that reinforcement what we are passing from the top of the beam just underside the vertical stirrup is the major reinforcement and it is the critical reinforcement. So, if the depth of the vertical stirrup is less, then though we will cast a full depth of the beam, we will get only a beam which is having of much less effective depth. It is a very common and I mean very important thing to look after at the site, and it is also neglected. I hope I have helped you with my discussion. I think we should call it for today enough, because it is almost getting 11 now. Okay, we will discuss regarding columns on tomorrow. See, I thought that I will be able to discuss regarding the columns also by today, but as we continue on discussing, from one thing I am getting into another thing. So, it is getting a bit lengthy. No problem. Tomorrow we will discuss on columns. Good night.